Hello everyone, my name is Zach. Welcome back to my channel. I hope you're doing well today. I thought something fun to do today would be to go over all the books I read because of Booktube before I joined Booktube and give a quick synopsis and review of each. I'm going to list these in order from least favorite to favorite because I don't really remember what order I read them in and I don't feel like looking it up. That being said, let's just dive right in. Hey guys, Editing Zach here is popping in real quick. I wanted to quickly apologize. This video has some audio issues because I had the mic too close to my face, so when I started to get loud when I was filming, the audio clips a bit. Also, I know the video can be a little choppy based on the edits. I just had to edit it that way because of the footage I was working with, so I apologize. Someday I'm going to make a video where I don't have to add anything in, but it's not this one. So anyway, I hope you enjoy. So the first book on the list is the only DNF on the list, and that is Red Rising by Pierce Brown. I read this because I read The Hunger Games back in the day and I really enjoyed it, and this was kind of sold to me as The Hunger Games in space, and so I thought maybe it would work for me, but all it really did was kind of cement my dislike for the dystopian genre. And while the world building is really impressive and everything, I felt like it was a fairly standard dystopian, so it didn't do much for me. Also, my biggest complaint is I thought the main character Darrow was just I hate everything rage monster, and it just kind of dragged. I only got like 3 hours into the audiobook, so I can only imagine how it feels to have to read that through the whole book. I mean, I know he probably grows and is less angry over time, but I just wasn't willing to go through the journey. The second book I read because of Booktube was Artemis by Andy Weir. This one's kind of cheating because I had read The Martian and I was sort of interested in reading Artemis, but I kind of moved it up on my priority list because I saw that quite a few booktubers I liked had rant reviews on it, and I was kind of curious as to whether or not it just wasn't for them or if it wasn't very good. So I got the audiobook of it, and it's bad. It's real bad. Turns out I had the exact same problem that everyone else had, and that's that the main character, Jaz Bashir, is a whiny jackass. She constantly complains about everything. She whines throughout the whole book. She blames everyone else for her problems. She's really judgmental, and it wasn't fun. Also, I didn't hate the hard science fiction aspect as much as a lot of other people did, but also I'm not the biggest fan of chemistry, and it was almost entirely chemistry, so I wasn't the biggest fan of it either. So yeah, I gave this book a 1 star. It was terrible. Don't read it. The next 2 books I read were both recommended to me by Kat from Paperback Dreams, and they were 2 contemporaries, and they cemented that contemporary is not really my genre, but the first one I read was Radio Silence by Alice Oseman. This book centers around Frances as she's spending her last year in the English equivalent of high school, and she is trying to get into Oxford, and she really enjoys the podcast, and things kind of go from there. So I think this book has a good message for teens and high schoolers especially, but I read this book in college after I would have needed the message or it could have impacted me, so it was kind of a day late and a dollar short. That's not an objective flaw with this book, but it kind of hindered my enjoyment of it. Also, I was friends with my entire high school's academic top 10, who are all girls by the way, and Frances didn't remind me of a single one. Everyone from my high school who was super smart like Frances was, they were doing activities and they had hobbies and they had passions and they were, caught up on all the Netflix shows. So the fact that she had nothing but this podcast and some TV shows and school didn't feel realistic. She should have been volunteering. She should have been part of clubs. She should have done all these things. So it didn't feel like a realistic character to me, and that really kind of hindered it. So I gave it a 2.5 out of 5. I don't think it's objectively bad, but it wasn't really for me. The other contemporary I read was We Are the Ants by Sean David Hutchinson. This book follows a boy, which I don't remember his name, Henry. We Are the Ants is about a boy named Henry who's abducted by aliens and told he can save the entire Earth by pressing a button, or he can let it die. And he's given a specific amount of time that I don't remember to make that decision. Kind of like I was saying with Radio Silence, I think there's a great message in here for teens. Unfortunately, I read it in college, and the message of, you should appreciate things in life, appreciate the small things, life's not all bad. I'd already learned these lessons by this point, so for me it didn't really resonate that strongly. Also, I felt the main character Henry was really whiny, and he didn't really seem to appreciate a lot of the side characters who seemed to be trying to help him out and cheer him up a lot of the time, and he just kind of came off like that emo kid in high school. This life is suffering, man. It just... I think I'm going to donate both of those to the library so they can hopefully impact a teen that needs them, but they certainly weren't for me. The next book I read was An Absolutely Remarkable Thing by Hank Green. This book follows April May, who leaves her job one night to discover that there is suddenly a giant sculpture in the middle of a sidewalk in Manhattan. She has her friend take a video of her interacting with it. They post it on YouTube and discover that the next day she's gone viral because there are several of these things across the world and people are trying to figure out what's going on. I gave this book a 3 out of 5. I didn't really enjoy it as much as everyone else seemed to, and I have a couple reasons why. For one, this is a science fiction book, and there's one component of the science fiction where it didn't really make sense to me. It revolves around computer programming, and I don't really know that much about it, so maybe other people will understand it more. But for me, it came off confusing and kind of muddled everything. 2, this book is trying to be both a science fiction book, but it's also trying to comment on internet fame and how it impacts people. And those are two fine ideas, but they kind of clash together, and so it doesn't really succeed, in my opinion, at being about either of those things. It tries to be both, and that, again, muddies everything. Number 3, Hank Green does this thing that I've seen quite a few authors do, and that's the Mary Sue overcorrection, as I like to call it, where people have complained that characters of books are Mary Sues too often, and so authors have gone out of their way to make characters flawed, which is a good thing, but in books like this, it goes from the character's perfect to the character never seems to do anything right, and that's frustrating and just makes you feel like your character's dumbass. And the last thing, Hank Green does this thing, it's one of my biggest pet peeves, which is there's an offhand comment towards the beginning of the book, which gives away the ending entirely if you catch it. I don't know why authors seem to do this. I've seen it done a lot where they just include this tiny little comment about nothing, but if you pay attention to what's being said in it, it totally gives everything away. And it's really frustrating because I don't want to know what happens at the end. I want to be, in suspense. I want to read. I want to try to figure out what's going to happen, but I know it's going to happen because you told me. Don't do it. Gave this book a 3 out of 5. I'm debating whether or not I should keep it or not because I know he's writing a sequel and it might make this book better when it's part of a complete story, but I don't know. I just didn't really enjoy it as much as I had hoped. The next book I read was The Wicked Deep by Shay Earnshaw. This book is set in a small town in Oregon where in 1822 they drowned 3 women who were accused of witchcraft. And every year since, they come back and they drown boys in the harbor. And it's about a girl who meets this boy about the time where the witches come out every year. A lot of people on Booktube dislike this book because it was sold as a paranormal romance. But I really enjoyed this book because I didn't realize it was supposed to be a paranormal romance. This book was recommended to me by Maddie the Book Pusher, and she mentioned that it had a witch's curse and that it was spooky and it was really atmospheric, and my brain said Silent Hill plus the Crucible, so I had to check it out. And it was everything I wanted it to be. It was spooky, it had a great atmosphere, the witch's curse was really cool, and I didn't really care that the romance was kind of bleh because I didn't realize I was supposed to be paying attention. I figured it would have a romance, I figured it would kind of be mediocre, and it was, but I wasn't reading it for the romance, so it really worked for me, but I could understand why it didn't work for other people. I gave this book a 5 out of 5. I really loved it. As I said, it was everything I hoped it would be. If you're into books with a lot of atmosphere, books about witches, this kind of thing, then you might want to check it out. But if you're reading it for the romance, I would say maybe not. The next book was recommended to me by Galatea, the Authentic Observer, and that is Feed by Mira Grant. Mira Grant, if you didn't know, is the pseudonym of one Shauna McGuire, who is famous for her Wayward Children series, and Galatea described this book as a zombie novel where society doesn't break down. And that was pretty much all I needed to hear. I didn't listen to anything else she said, I just picked it up and started reading it. Basically, this book is a conspiracy thriller set in a world where zombies have risen and society has just kind of morphed to deal with it. I really enjoyed this book. I also gave this one a 5 out of 5. I love this book. I've read the entire trilogy. I was kind of disappointed with how the last book was, but the first 2 books are really good. The characters, especially the 3 main characters of this book, are all really great, and they're really distinct from one another. And so if you like conspiracy thrillers and you don't mind or you like zombies, I would highly recommend this one too, especially around Halloween time. And the last book I want to mention I listened to on audiobook for the audio bookathon, and that is The Hate U Give by Angie Thomas. The Hate U Give is, of course, a book inspired by Black Lives Matter, which is very famous on Booktube and has been going around and has been a New York Times bestseller for months now, and I really think it deserves all that. I read this book specifically for a challenge that was to read a book out of your comfort zone, And I don't really like books that talk politics because I read to escape the politicalization of the world. You know, it feels like you're constantly being thrown politics in your face, and I try to escape from that. But I figured if there was one book worth going out of my comfort zone for, it should probably be this one, and I'm really glad I did. I feel like she did a really good job of talking to both people in and out of Black Lives Matter. There's some bits about like anti-rioting, but there's also quotes, I don't remember the exact quote, but I think it was like, I understand not all cops are bad, but that doesn't mean I'm still not afraid of them. And I thought that was kind of a beautiful statement to try to communicate to people what people in the African American communities in the United States kind of go through. And I thought that was a beautiful quote, and it kind of really spoke to me. So super glad I read it. 5 out of 5. I think it deserves all the praise it's gotten. And yeah. So there you have it. Those were the books I read because of Booktube before I joined Booktube, which is a mouthful. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. Feel free to subscribe if you feel so inclined, and I will see you next time.